Welcome back to Revise and Resubmit, the podcast that takes, those really dense academic papers and makes them surprisingly interesting. I'm Pavlov.
And I'm Nikita.
Imagine stepping into a city just buzzing with energy. New businesses popping up everywhere, promising to completely change how you do everything.
Yeah.
Grabbing a ride, ordering dinner.
Right.
At first, it feels amazing, almost like magic. So much convenience, right?
Mm-hmm.
New jobs, incredible innovation all around you.
Yeah, that initial excitement.
But then, maybe after a while, you start to notice the other side of it. The quieter, maybe darker parts. Local shops struggling, maybe closing down. Gig workers facing really unstable conditions. Or, even unexpected damage to the environment. It's that moment of, aha, but mixed with a little bit of, wait a minute, something isn't quite right here. It really highlights how what seems like pure progress can actually have these hidden, sometimes unintended consequences.
And that tension, that really complex interplay between innovation and its broader impact is exactly what we're going to explore today.
Yeah.
This discussion is built directly from a really thoughtfully crafted and rigorously peer-reviewed article. It's titled Taming Unicorns Toward a New Normal of Responsible Entrepreneurship.
And it's a truly foundational piece of work. It was published in the prestigious Academy of Management Review journal, which, well, it's widely recognized as one of the absolute top-tier academic journals in its field.
Absolutely. The brilliant minds behind it are Jonah Zankl from the University of Queensland and Matthew Grimes from the University of Cambridge.
We genuinely encourage you, really, whether you listen to us regularly or you're just finding us now, please try and set aside some time to read their full article.
Yeah, it's worth it.
The link, as always, is right there in the show notes. It's a profoundly important read for anyone interested in the future of innovation, honestly.
Our mission today, then, is to kind of unpack this paper for you.
Right.
Especially if you're maybe just embarking on your own research journey. We want to help you understand its core arguments and, what it means for how we think about innovation today.
And how it might even shape your own thinking as you start out. Okay, so let's get into it.
So maybe to begin, let's just make sure we're on the same page about what we mean by a unicorn startup.
Good idea.
This term, it was coined back in 2013, and it refers to these entrepreneurial companies, usually tech-based, that get a valuation of over $1 billion, either through private funding or, when they go public.
Right. And they really embody this idea of rapid commercialization, don't they? Disrupting existing industries, scaling incredibly fast.
Exactly, often through things like network effects and, crucially, huge amounts of venture capital investment.
Yeah. And for a really long time, the dominant idea, and this was embraced by policymakers everywhere, was that this kind of entrepreneurial disruption was just, undeniably good, a force for progress.
The prevailing thought was basically innovation leads to reform, and any negative stuff, that's just an unavoidable part of the process.
Like you couldn't have one without the other. Earlier research often just took these downsides as a given, almost like they were baked in and couldn't be separated.
But here's where it gets really interesting. While that model is still, celebrated for creating jobs, generating wealth, stimulating growth,
Sure, the upsides are there.
there's this growing chorus among scholars and just observers pointing to the pretty significant downsides. We're talking about, displacement of whole professions, entire industries, people's livelihoods.
Yeah.
Plus these major societal and ecological externalities that often just aren't managed.
Right. So these market disruptions, even as they bring reform, they've consistently led to these documented unintended consequences.
Yeah. And at its most extreme, entrepreneurship, as it's often practiced today, can even look like it's just extracting value or sometimes actually being destructive.
So if these downsides are becoming so clear, what stopped us from really dealing with them? Is it just that people didn't see it, or is it something deeper in the system?
That's a great question, and it brings us to a really crucial concept the paper explores: the influence of financialization and something the authors call the neoliberal entrepreneurship ideology, or NEI.
Okay, let's break that down. First, financialization. What does that mean in this context?
Well, broadly, it just refers to the increasing role of financial motives, financial markets, financial institutions across the whole global economy. It's this huge, sweeping trend that's dramatically reshaped how innovation itself happens.
Okay. And how does that fuel the disruption and these negative externalities we're talking about?
Well, one key factor is deregulation. After the post-war boom, policymakers facing various constraints tried to stimulate their economies by loosening regulations.
Right.
And this allowed a flood of cheap, sort of unrestricted capital to flow into startups. Think about pension funds suddenly being allowed to invest in high-risk venture capital. That just wasn't happening before on that scale.
And that flood of cheap money had a direct effect, didn't it? Like leading to these massive, often speculative valuations for startups.
Exactly. Companies were getting valued at these astronomical sums, often with very little actual evidence of, real value creation or even profitability down the line. The focus became almost entirely on just rapid user growth, driven by these winner-takes-all dynamics.
Right, the idea that if you just grow fast enough, you'll eventually dominate the market. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy almost.
Precisely. It's like a race where the main goal isn't solving a problem necessarily, but hitting that billion-dollar valuation, kind of no matter the cost along the way.
Yeah, I see.
And financialization also, the paper argues, profoundly narrowed the intentions of founders, with this idea of shareholder primacy becoming so entrenched.
The idea that the company's main job is to make money for shareholders.
Exactly. Startup boards started prioritizing fundraising and that rapid growth above almost everything else.
So looking too closely at potential negative side effects that would actually go against those goals.
Right. It could slow things down, make fundraising harder. So there was very little incentive for founders or their boards to really scrutinize those potential harms.
Okay, and this is where the neoliberal entrepreneurship ideology, the NEI, comes in.
Yes. The paper argues that this whole surge in entrepreneurial disruption actually gave rise to NEI. This ideology basically institutionalizes the belief that market reform and these unmanaged negative externalities are fundamentally linked. They're inseparable.
Like a package deal.
Yeah, it's become this deeply embedded myth that one is just a necessary byproduct, maybe even a sign of the other.
So, if I'm understanding this right, the really fundamental shift the paper is pushing for is about seeing these externalities not as inevitable, but as something that can and should be managed.
Exactly. And this leads the authors to ask two really pivotal questions. First, okay, what led to this situation? What are the institutional foundations that resulted in this dominance of entrepreneurial activity where founders chase market reform without really accounting for the negative externalities?
And we've just touched on a lot of that, the financialization, the rise of NEI, that's the why.
Right. But it's their second question that really shifts the ground. How might societies transition to a new normal? One where we still get the positive aspects of market disruption, but we actively ensure those happen while also minimizing the negative societal disruption, those unmanaged externalities.
Wow. So it's not just about tweaking things, it's a fundamental reimagining of how innovation should work. That feels like a really compelling alternative.
It is. And they illustrate this by contrasting NEI with what they propose, which they call Responsible Entrepreneurship Ideology, or REI.
Okay.
And these two ideologies offer, diametrically opposed justifications for how value should be created. Under NEI, the entrepreneur is kind of this heroic figure, mainly serving the capital providers, focused on those huge returns.
Right.
But with REI, the entrepreneur becomes more of a steward of novelty, accountable not just for responsible market reforms, but also for identifying, mitigating, and managing potential externalities.
That's a huge shift from growth at all costs to maybe growth with responsibility.
Exactly. And the role of the sponsors, like VCs, changes too. Under NEI, they're mostly looking for those big returns and maybe helping navigate regulations. But under REI, sponsors have a kind of duty to ensure entrepreneurs have the resources and the skills to create reforms while also managing the externalities.
The performance priorities also change then. NEI pushes for speed, short-term growth, fast exits.
Right, often ignoring long-term consequences, whereas REI prioritizes long-term market reforms that actually enhance societal welfare. It accepts that maybe things need to move a bit slower to properly identify risks and find more efficient, less harmful ways.
And the spatial focus, too, you mentioned that differs. NEI is often about global scaling, right? Just rolling things out everywhere.
Yeah, and often accepting that the negative impacts might be spread out across different regions, sometimes far from the source. REI, on the other hand, focuses more on locally defined market needs, adapting solutions to specific contexts rather than just imposing a single model everywhere.
Makes sense. And finally, the stakeholder orientation. NEI seems very focused on private value for the entrepreneurs and investors.
Yes, often extracting value and kind of pushing the externalities onto society, the environment, workers.
Whereas REI is centered on creating collective stakeholder value, actively internalizing those externalities, making them part of the venture's own responsibility.
It's about building a business that serves the broader system, not just extracts from it.
So the real breakthrough here, the core insight, is that REI proposes this decoupling. It says market reforms can proceed while we control the potential externalities.
Exactly.
That's not just a small change. It's a fundamental challenge to that established NEI idea that they have to go together. It's saying, wait, we don't actually have to break things to make progress.
Right. Now you might be thinking, okay, this sounds good, sounds desirable, but how on earth do we actually get there?
Yeah, that's the big question. If NEI is so embedded, how do you shift it?
It is challenging, precisely because NEI is so deeply woven into our existing institutions, financial markets, legal systems, even cultural norms. The authors talk about two kinds of interdependencies we need to address to make this shift possible.
Okay, what are they?
First, there are what they call homeostatic interdependencies. You can think of these as all the connections and relationships within the current system, like competitive dynamics between firms, the way capital markets work, even media narratives that actively work together to keep the current NEI equilibrium in place.
So just changing one small thing won't work because the rest of the system pulls it back.
Exactly. Isolated changes tend to get absorbed or counteracted. To overcome this, we need to target specific leverage points.
Leverage points, like places where a small push can create a big change.
Precisely. Specific structures or relationships that, if altered, can catalyze much larger system changes. The paper focuses quite a bit on what they call lower-order leverage points, mostly related to governance structures.
Okay, so what would that look like in practice?
Yeah.
New incentives.
Yes, definitely. Imagine, say, a progressive tax system that actually favors responsible entrepreneurship. Or R&D subsidies specifically targeted at innovations that prioritize positive societal impact, not just commercial potential. And new forms of capital are crucial. Things like evergreen capital, where investors have much longer investment horizons, not just looking for a quick exit in 5-7 years. And impact investing, which explicitly tries to measure and account for social and environmental externalities alongside financial returns. These can genuinely shift the intentions of both entrepreneurs and their investors.
It changes the rules of the game, essentially.
It does. And alongside incentives, we need new monitoring approaches.
Right, because you need to know if it's actually working.
Exactly. Think about real-time impact monitoring tools becoming more common, or public rating systems for ethical practices, or even mandatory comprehensive environmental impact reporting, like Scope 3 emissions disclosures, which are really challenging because they track emissions across the entire value chain, not just the company's direct operations.
That sounds complex but necessary.
It is. And then there are ideas like anticipatory regulation, where regulators try to proactively identify and test solutions for challenges from new technologies before they become huge problems. And regulatory sandboxes, which offer flexible legal environments to test responsible innovation safely. All these tools can help reorient our collective attention towards being more responsible from the outset.
So that's tackling the system's tendency to stay the same. What's the second type of interdependency?
Those are the transitional interdependencies. As we actually start to shift away from NEI towards REI, new tensions, or what the authors call paradoxes, will inevitably pop up.
Paradoxes.
Like contradictions.
Yeah, contradictory yet interrelated elements that tend to persist over time. For example, a constant tension between wanting rapid innovation and needing careful consideration of long-term effects. A single silver bullet solution probably won't work for these complex tensions.
What do we do? The paper argues we need to link multiple interventions together into what they call guardrails. Think of these as configurations of frameworks, tools, and regulations that work in concert to help navigate and manage these emerging paradoxes.
Okay, like a system of checks and balances designed for these specific tensions. Can you give an example?
Sure. Take the intertemporal paradox, that tension between short-term rapid growth and long-term societal welfare.
Right, the pressure to scale fast versus thinking about the future.
Exactly. Guardrails here could involve combining that evergreen capital we talked about with strong anticipatory regulation. The long-term capital eases the pressure for immediate exits, while the regulation ensures future impacts are considered. It helps balance the drive for speed with the need for societal well-being.
Like putting speed bumps on the innovation superhighway, but maybe smart speed bumps?
Kind of, yeah. Then there's the interspatial paradox, that tension between wanting global scale and addressing local needs effectively.
The one-size-fits-all problem versus local adaptation.
Right. Guardrails here could involve things like supporting community-owned accelerators, fostering cooperative business models, or using conscious scaling frameworks that explicitly guide companies on how to adapt locally while maybe still tackling global challenges.
And monitoring.
Monitoring could involve applying standards like the Ethical OS Toolkit for digital technologies, which helps developers think through potential harms, or requiring detailed reporting on how solutions impact different communities.
Okay, and the last paradox mentioned was the stakeholder orientation paradox. Private versus collective value.
Yes, that tension between maximizing returns for founders and investors versus sharing the benefits of innovation more broadly with employees, communities, society.
How do guardrails help there?
Well, you could have structural solutions like fit-for-purpose governance. A good example cited is OpenAI's original structure, with a nonprofit overseeing a capped profit entity, specifically designed to balance mission and profit. Or things like innovation commons, where R&D outcomes are shared more openly for collective benefit. Or even state-held golden shares in critical ventures, giving the public a voice to prevent excessive rent-seeking or harmful actions.
And transparency must play a role, too.
Absolutely. Things like open capitalization tables, so you can see who owns what, and expanded investment disclosures, so stakeholders understand the financial incentives at play. It's all about building equity and accountability into the very foundation.
Wow, so these guardrails aren't just single policies, they're interconnected systems.
Exactly. And the really powerful idea is that when these guardrails are dynamically configured and coordinated, they can start to influence even higher order leverage points. Meaning they can lead to truly fundamental shifts in the actual goals and the underlying ideologies of the whole system. It's not just about tweaking the engine anymore. It's potentially about changing the destination.
That's fascinating. They help make these big abstract ideas like, say, a degrowth economy or responsible entrepreneurship itself feel more tangible, more achievable.
Precisely. Think about the B Corp movement. That's a real-world example. With its rigorous certifications for social and environmental performance, its benefit corporation legal structures, its lobbying efforts, it's a whole set of guardrails working together.
And it's effectively embedding a different relationship between profit and purpose into business. It shows an alternative is viable.
It does. And these coordinated efforts can also help, maybe subtly, relieve resistance from powerful stakeholders who benefit from the current way things are.
How so?
By using a strategy the authors call issue linking. Essentially, you widen the scope of negotiation to find mutually beneficial exchanges. Maybe you gain commitment on some lower priority issues first, building trust and momentum, before tackling the really high priority controversial ones. We've seen this approach used in things like the UN Global Compact.
It's a kind of strategic navigation of change.
Yeah, a way to build momentum and coalition around a new direction.
So, let's bring this back. What does all this mean for you, listening? Especially if you're maybe just starting your own research journey or you're just trying to make sense of the world of innovation.
Well, the core takeaway is that this discussion fundamentally challenges that ingrained idea that entrepreneurial disruption has to lead to unmanaged negative consequences. It's just not inevitable.
Right. It highlights that we, as societies, actually do have the agency, the power to organize entrepreneurial activity differently. We can set it up to encourage market reforms while simultaneously managing the associated downsides.
And why is this new normal, this REI, desirable? Well, first, accounting for externalities isn't just about limiting harm. It can actually spur incredible creativity. It forces entrepreneurs to think differently, more sustainably, potentially leading to better innovations.
Constraints breeding creativity.
Exactly, but perhaps more importantly, it feels absolutely crucial for addressing the really big, increasing existential risks we face, things like ecosystem collapse, or the potential dangers of bioengineered pandemics, or runaway AI. These kinds of risks demand preemptive governance, careful thought beforehand, not just trying to clean up the mess afterwards.
And we are already seeing small signs of this shift, aren't we?
Yeah.
You hear prominent figures calling for guardrails around new technologies like generative AI.
Yeah, urging a slowing down of development to ensure responsible use. That's a real-time example of the principles in this paper playing out in public debate.
So for you, perhaps just starting your research, what's the invitation here?
I think the invitation is to consider how theories, like the ones Zankl and Grimes present in this paper, can do more than just describe or explain the world as it currently is.
Yeah.
They can actively encourage us to envision and maybe even help build the world as it could be. It really opens up entirely new avenues for research questions, for thinking about the purpose and impact of innovation in society.
It's a powerful thought. This whole exploration really reveals a profound insight, doesn't it? That entrepreneurship isn't some fixed, uncontrollable force of nature.
Not at all. It's a dynamic process, fundamentally shaped by the ideologies and the institutions that we collectively choose to build and maintain.
Which means we absolutely can design systems that foster incredible innovation, that create wealth, that address pressing societal needs, all while consciously managing the potential downsides.
It suggests a path toward a more balanced, more sustainable form of progress.
So maybe a final provocative thought for you to consider. As you embark on your own research, or perhaps even your own entrepreneurial path, how might you contribute?
How might you help design or implement these dynamic configurations of guardrails? How can your work ensure that the innovations of tomorrow truly benefit everyone, creating a more responsible and sustainable future for us all?
And don't forget to subscribe to Revise and Resubmit on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Until next time, keep those minds curious, keep questioning, and keep revising and resubmitting.
রিভাইজ অ্যান্ড রিসাবমিটে স্বাগতম। আমি প্যাভলভ।
আর আমি নিকিতা।
ভাবা যায় একটা কোম্পানি, ইমক্লোন ধরুন, বায়োটেক কোম্পানি, বাজারে কোনো প্রোডাক্ট আনার প্রায় 12 বছর আগে ওরা পাবলিক শেয়ার বিক্রি করলো আর পেল বিশাল ভ্যালুয়েশন। বিনিয়োগকারীরা তারা শুধু ভবিষ্যতের একটা সম্ভাবনার উপর ভরসা করেই টাকা ঢেলেছিলেন। এই ধরনের ঘটনাই কিন্তু আজকের দিনের যে একটা সংস্কৃতি দেখি, ওই যে ইউনিকর্ন স্টার্টআপ, সেটার ভিত গড়ে দিয়েছিল। দ্রুত বিলিয়ন ডলার কোম্পানি হয় যেন মূল লক্ষ্য। আজকের আলোচনাটা দেখুন এমনই একটা গুরুত্বপূর্ণ বিষয় নিয়ে। এটা আসলে একটা গভীর পর্যালোচনার সারসংক্ষেপ, আর এটা প্রকাশিত হয়েছে খুব নামকরা একটা জার্নালে, একাডেমি অফ ম্যানেজমেন্ট রিভিউ। এটা কিন্তু জেসে জার্নাল নয়, ফাইন্যান্সিয়াল টাইমস, ইউনিভার্সিটি অফ টেক্সাসের ডালাস এদের সেরা গবেষণা প্রকাশনার তালিকায় আছে, যাকে বলে একেবারে প্রথম সারির FT50 এবং UTD24 লিস্টেড জার্নাল। এর লেখক দুজন, ইউনিভার্সিটি অফ কুইন্সল্যান্ডের জোনা জ্যাঙ্কল আর ইউনিভার্সিটি অফ ক্যামব্রিজের ম্যাথিউ গ্রাইমস। যারা শুনছেন তাদের একটা অনুরোধ করব, সময় করে এই অসাধারণ আর কঠোরভাবে রিভিউ হওয়া গবেষণাপত্রটা পড়বেন। লিঙ্কটা শো নোটসে দেওয়া থাকছে। এই আলোচনাটা আমরা সাজিয়েছি বিশেষ করে তাদের কথা ভেবে যারা একাডেমিক গবেষণার জগতে নতুন, হয়তো নিজেদের রিসার্চ জার্নি শুরু করতে চলেছেন, বিশেষ করে যদি উদ্যোক্তা কার্যক্রম বা এন্টারপ্রেনারশিপ নিয়ে আগ্রহ থাকে। আমরা চেষ্টা করব এই পেপারটার মূল ভাবনাগুলো সহজভাবে ধরতে। দেখুন, এন্টারপ্রেনারশিপ বা উদ্যোক্তা কার্যক্রম এটা নিঃসন্দেহে দারুণ একটা ব্যাপার। এটা বাজারে নতুন কিছু আনে, পুরনো ব্যবস্থাকে নাড়া দেয়, যাকে আমরা বলি মার্কেট রিফর্ম, বাজার সংস্কার। এর ফলে অর্থনৈতিক সমৃদ্ধি বাড়ে, ঠিক, কিন্তু এর একটা অন্য পিঠও আছে, যেটা আমরা প্রায়ই দেখি। যেমন ধরুন, মানুষের চাকরি চলে যাওয়া, পরিবেশের ক্ষতি, এই যে জিনিসগুলো, এগুলোকে বলে নেগেটিভ এক্সটার্নালিটিস বা নেতিবাচক প্রভাব। অনেকদিন ধরে একটা ধারণা ছিল যে এই দুটো জিনিস সংস্কার আর নেতিবাচক প্রভাব এগুলো একসাথেই আসবে, আলাদা করা যাবে না।
ঠিক তাই। আর এই গবেষণাপত্রটা ঠিক এখানে দুটো খুব জরুরি প্রশ্ন তুলছে। প্রথমত, এমন একটা উদ্যোক্তা সংস্কৃতি কি করে তৈরি হলো বা প্রভাবশালী হলো, যেটা শুধু মার্কেট রিফর্মের দিকেই তাকায়, কিন্তু এর ফলে যে নেতিবাচক দিকগুলো তৈরি হচ্ছে সেগুলোকে হয় এড়িয়ে যায়, না হলে ধরে নেয় যে এগুলো তো হবেই। আর দ্বিতীয় প্রশ্নটা হলো, তাহলে সমাজ কিভাবে একটা নতুন স্বাভাবিক অবস্থার দিকে যেতে পারে, যেখানে বাজারের এই পজিটিভ সংস্কারগুলোও থাকবে, আবার একই সঙ্গে ওই নেতিবাচক প্রভাবগুলোকেও ঠিকঠাক নিয়ন্ত্রণ করা যাবে। এটা কি আদৌ সম্ভব?
খুব গুরুত্বপূর্ণ প্রশ্ন। আর এই উত্তর খুঁজতে গিয়ে গবেষকরা একটা ধারণার কথা বলছেন, নিওলিবেরাল উদ্যোক্তা আদর্শ, সংক্ষেপে NEI। তারা দেখাচ্ছেন কিভাবে অর্থনীতির ওপর ফিনান্সিয়াল মার্কেটের প্রভাব বৃদ্ধি, মানে যাকে বলে ফিনান্সিয়ালাইজেশন, আর তার সাথে নব্য উদারনীতিবাদী চিন্তাভাবনা, যেটা মূলত মুক্তবাজার, কম সরকারি নিয়ন্ত্রণে বিশ্বাসী। এই দুটো মিলেমিশেই এই এনইআই তৈরি হয়েছে। এর বৈশিষ্ট্যগুলো কি? খুব দ্রুত বৃদ্ধি আর লাভের ওপর জোর দেওয়া, ফোকাসটা মূলত গ্লোবাল মার্কেটের দিকে, আর সবচেয়ে বড় কথা, ব্যক্তিগত বা শেয়ার হোল্ডারদের ভ্যালু বাড়ানোকেই মানে প্রধান লক্ষ্য ধরা। আর এই মডেলে বাজার সংস্কার করতে গেলে কিছু নেতিবাচক জিনিস ঘটবেই, এটা যেন মেনে নেওয়া হয়, অনিবার্য।
হ্যাঁ, একদম। আর এর ফলে যেটা হয়, দীর্ঘমেয়াদী সামাজিক বা পরিবেশের ভালো মন্দের চেয়ে ওই স্বল্পমেয়াদী আর্থিক লাভটাই অনেক বেশি গুরুত্ব পায়। কিন্তু গবেষকরা এখানেই থামেননি। তারা একটা বিকল্প পথেরও কথা ভেবেছেন। সেটাকে তারা বলছেন দায়িত্বশীল উদ্যোক্তা আদর্শ বা REI, রেসপন্সিবল এন্টারপ্রেনিউরিয়াল আইডিওলজি। এই আদর্শটা কিন্তু বেশ আলাদা। REI জোর দেয় হচ্ছে গিয়ে দীর্ঘমেয়াদী কল্যাণ আর আসল টেকসই সংস্কারের ওপর। এখানে ব্যবসার নজরটা শুধু বিশ্ববাজারে আটকে থাকে না, বরং স্থানীয় চাহিদা, স্থানীয় পরিস্থিতি এগুলোর ওপরেও থাকে। আর মূল্যের ধারণাটাও এখানে অনেক বড়। শুধু শেয়ার হোল্ডারদের লাভ নয়, বরং ব্যবসার সাথে যুক্ত সবাই, কর্মী, ক্রেতা, সমাজ, এমনকি পরিবেশ, সবার জন্য একসাথে ভ্যালু তৈরি করার কথা ভাবে। সবচেয়ে জরুরি বিষয় হল REI বিশ্বাস করে যে মার্কেট রিফর্ম আর নেতিবাচক প্রভাব নিয়ন্ত্রণ এই দুটো একসঙ্গেই সম্ভব, এগুলো পরস্পর বিরোধী নয়।
এটা শুনতে তো খুব ভালো লাগছে, আশার কথা। কিন্তু গবেষকরা এটাও বলছেন যে এনইআই থেকে REI-তে যাওয়াটা, মানে এই রূপান্তর, এটা অত সহজ নয়। কারণ এখনকার যে সিস্টেমগুলো আছে, যেমন ধরুন বিনিয়োগের পদ্ধতি, সরকারি নিয়মকানুন, এমনকি আমাদের চিন্তাভাবনা, এগুলো অনেকাংশেই ওই পুরনো এনইআই মডেলকেই টিকিয়ে রাখতে চায়, পরিবর্তনকে বাধা দেয় আর কি। এর জন্য দরকার বেশ গভীর, মানে পদ্ধতিগত পরিবর্তন, সিস্টেমস চেঞ্জ। গবেষকরা কিছু নির্দিষ্ট কৌশল বা পদ্ধতির কথা বলেছেন, যেগুলোকে তারা বলছেন গার্ড রেল। এগুলো এই নতুন দায়িত্বশীল আদর্শকে প্রতিষ্ঠা করতে সাহায্য করতে পারে, যেমন বিনিয়োগের শর্ত পাল্টানো বা এমন পলিসি আনা যা পরিবেশ বা সমাজের উপর প্রভাবটাকে হিসাবে ধরে। সময়ের অভাবে এর গভীরে আজ আর যাওয়া যাচ্ছে না।
একদম। তবে মূল কথাটা পরিষ্কার, উদ্যোক্তা হওয়ার যে মডেলটা আমরা সচরাচর দেখি, সেটাই কিন্তু একমাত্র পথ নয়। মানে শুধু লাভের পিছনে না ছুটেও সামাজিক এবং পরিবেশের প্রতি দায়িত্ব রেখেও সফল ব্যবসা করা সম্ভব। বাজার সংস্কার আর দায়িত্বশীলতা, এই দুটোকে এক সূত্রে গাঁথার পথ আমাদের তৈরি করতে হবে।
জগতে নতুন আসছেন, তাদের জন্য একটা প্রশ্ন রেখে যাই। আপনারা যারা ভবিষ্যতে উদ্যোক্তা কার্যক্রম নিয়ে কাজ করবেন, তারা কিভাবে নিজেদের গবেষণা বা কাজের মাধ্যমে এই দায়িত্বশীল উদ্যোক্তা আদর্শ, মানে REI, এটা তৈরিতে সাহায্য করতে পারেন? ভবিষ্যতের উদ্ভাবনগুলো কি কেবল লাভজনক হওয়ার দৌড়ে নামবে, নাকি একই সাথে দায়িত্বশীলও হবে? এটা কিন্তু আমাদের সবারই একটু ভেবে দেখা দরকার।
Forestil dig lige en virksomhed. Den bliver vurderet til over $1 milliard, før den overhovedet har et produkt at sælge.
Det lyder jo næsten som et eventyr, men altså i tech-verdenen, der ser vi det jo.
Ja, det gør vi. Og det viser jo den her enorme kraft, men måske også faldgrupperne ved den type værksætteri, der bare satser alt på lynhurtig vækst og det der med at ruske op i det hele.
Disruption, ja.
Præcis. Og den her disruption, den kan jo skabe helt fantastiske nye muligheder og markeder. Men spørgsmålet er så, efterlader den ikke også tit en regning? Hos samfundet måske? Eller miljøet?
Jo, det er et centralt spørgsmål.
Er de negative konsekvenser ligesom en uundgåelig pris, vi bare må betale for innovation?
Tja, det er jo det, vi skal kigge lidt på.
Netop. Og vores snak i dag, den tager udgangspunkt i en virkelig tankevækkende artikel. Den er fra det her ret prestigefyldte tidsskrift Academy of Management Review.
Det er et toptidsskrift, virkelig anerkendt globalt for kvaliteten jo. Det er på de der vigtige lister, FT50 og UTD24.
Lige præcis. Og den er skrevet af Jonah Zankl fra University of Queensland og Matthew Grimes fra University of Cambridge.
Dygtige folk.
Ja. Og en lille opfordring til dig, der lytter med. Især hvis du måske står over for at skulle i gang med din egen forskning, så brug lige lidt tid på at læse hele artiklen. Den er altså virkelig grundigt lavet og har været igennem en skrap fagfællebedømmelse.
Helt sikkert. Godt råd.
Vi lægger selvfølgelig et link i shownoterne, men lad os nu prøve sammen at folde nogle af de centrale idéer ud, så vi måske bedre kan forstå, hvordan vi kan tænke om iværksætteriets rolle i samfundet.
Lad os gøre det.
Okay, så lad os prøve at pakke det her lidt ud. Kernen i artiklen, det er vel det her spørgsmål. Selvom iværksætteri skaber forandring, skal det så ske på bekostning af samfundet eller miljøet?
Præcis. Og forfatterne, de peger jo på, at det her enorme fokus, vi ser på enhjørninge startups, altså de her milliarddollarvirksomheder, det hænger tæt sammen med det, de kalder finansialisering.
Finansialisering, okay. Hvad ligger der i det?
Altså kort sagt, så betyder det, at finansielle hensyn, hurtig vækst, højt afkast til investorerne, er kommet til at fylde enormt meget. Det har ligesom fremmet en bestemt måde at tænke iværksætteri på.
Okay.
Og den kalder de så neoliberal iværksætterideologi. Lad os bare kalde den NII for nemheds skyld.
Nej. Så det er en ideologi, hvor de her negative konsekvenser, forurening måske, eller tab af lokale jobs, nærmest bliver set som en acceptabel del af spillet. Måske endda nødvendig.
Ja, det er faktisk en central pointe. NRI retfærdiggør, eller i hvert fald accepterer en slags kobling mellem det at skabe nye markeder og så de her utilsigtede negative effekter for andre. Det, man kalder negative eksternaliteter.
Okay.
Fokus er på den kortsigtede profit, på global skalering, på privat gevinst. Men, og det er vigtigt, artiklen argumenterer jo stærkt for, at det her ikke er den eneste måde at gøre tingene på.
Nej, og det her, det bliver rigtig interessant, synes jeg. For de introducerer et modstykke, en ansvarlig iværksætterideologi, RI. Hvad går den så ud på?
RI handler grundlæggende om at afkoble innovationen fra de her skadevirkninger. Man ser iværksætteren mere som en slags forvalter.
En forvalter?
Ja, en, der har et ansvar for både at skabe noget nyt og for at håndtere de potentielle negative følger af det. Fokus flyttes væk fra den der helt kortsigtede private profit og over mod langsigtet værdiskabelse for mange flere.
For medarbejdere, lokalsamfundet, miljøet?
Lige præcis. Det handler om at skabe kollektiv værdi, ikke kun privat værdi for ejerne.
Det lyder som en ret fundamental ændring i måden at tænke på, men hvordan pokker kommer man fra den ene ideologi til den anden? Det virker jo som en kæmpe opgave.
Det er det også.
Især hvis man ser det fra et forskningsperspektiv. Hvordan kan man overhovedet studere eller påvirke sådan noget?
Ja, og det er her artiklen bliver lidt mere teoretisk. Men det er ret vigtigt, synes jeg. De taler om behovet for systemisk forandring. Og de bruger systemteori til at forklare det.
Okay, systemisk forandring.
Ja. Først skal man finde de rigtige løftestænger i systemet. Forestil dig det som små knapper eller håndtag i systemet. Det kan være skatteregler, krav til, hvordan virksomheder rapporterer, eller måden, vi finansierer startups på. Mm-hmm. Små justeringer der kan faktisk få ret stor effekt på adfærden i hele systemet. Det handler om at bryde de vaner og mønstret, de kalder det homeostatiske intradependenser, der ligesom holder den gamle NE-tankegang låst fast.
Lidt som at ændre spillereglerne for at få et andet resultat måske.
Præcis, lige præcis. Men når man så ændrer spillereglerne, så opstår der jo nye dilemmaer, nye spændinger. Det kalder de paradokser eller transitionelle intradependenser.
Paradokser? Okay, som hvad for eksempel?
Ja, for eksempel. Hvordan balancerer man de kortsigtede vækstmål med langsigtet bæredygtighed? Eller global ambition med lokal ansvarlighed? Eller de private incitamenter med det fælles bedste? Det er jo ikke nemt, vel?
Nej, det lyder som klassiske dilemmaer.
Netop. Og her introducerer de så ideen om rækværk. Guardrails. Det er ligesom en kombination af ting, der kan hjælpe med at navigere i de her paradokser.
Okay, rækværk. Hvad kan det være?
Det kan være incitamenter, som for eksempel adgang til det, de kalder tålmodig kapital, altså investeringer, der ikke kræver et lynhurtigt afkast. Og det kan være overvågningssystemer.
Som hvad?
Som nye former for regulering måske, eller krav om at rapportere på sin samfundsmæssige effekt, ikke kun den økonomiske bundlinje. Rækværkerne skal hjælpe os med at finde en både og balance, ikke enten eller.
Okay, så det handler om at finde balance midt i paradokserne.
Altså, jeg tror, det peger på, at det kan være utroligt værdifuldt, ikke kun at se på den enkelte iværksætter eller den enkelte virksomhed.
Men på det større system.
Lige præcis. At analysere det større system omkring dem. Hvordan former reglerne, normerne, ideologierne, de resultater, både de positive og de negative, som vi ser. Mm. Den helt centrale indsigt er måske, at den måde, vi i dag ofte tænker om og støtter iværksætteri på den her NEI-model, det er altså ikke en naturlov. Det kan ændres.
Vi kan aktivt forme det anderledes.
Ja, vi kan aktivt arbejde for at skabe rammer, der fremmer en mere ansvarlig form for innovation. Det udfordrer jo den der lidt dystre idé om, at fremskridt altid må koste noget for nogen.
Præcis. Og måske som en sidste tanke, du kan tage med dig og reflektere lidt over. Hvad nu, hvis vi for alvor begyndte at bygge ansvarlighed ind i selve fundamentet for iværksætteri? Altså ind i den måde, vi finansierer på, den måde, vi uddanner på, den måde, vi laver love på. Kunne vi så rent faktisk ændre de her enhjørninge fra at være de her mytiske og nogle gange lidt destruktive væsener, til rent faktisk at være kræfter, der bygger en bedre og mere retfærdig fremtid for os alle sammen?
Det er et godt spørgsmål at slutte.